My name is Jamie McWilliam, and this is an account of a 3-day sighting in September of 2010. On the 5th, just happened to be my birthday, I realized at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning that I hadn't paid my mortgage payment bill, and I had to get the money in to the bank account before morning. So my roommate was awake, so I asked him if he wanted to come with me for the walk down the tracks down to downtown to pay the bill. He said okay, so we left and we headed down through the tracks and paid the bill. Got about 4:30. We're on our way back down the tracks, heading home. It's a beautiful night, absolutely crystal clear, and the moon has already gone down because it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, but it's black and there's no clouds in the sky, and the stars are just, for being in a city, you can see them absolutely fantastic. So I was watching them as we're walking along, and Richard got a text message. So he had to check his phone, and so he stopped. I sat down on the tracks and I was looking up, stargazing. Wasn't looking up maybe more than a couple of seconds after, and all of a sudden, from the right hand side, I see a triangle of stars. I say that because they look like this. The light from this triangle, the light matched the stars around it, but it was a perfect triangle, and it went from west to east in 2 seconds. It took maybe to cross the horizon. Halfway across, I realized what I was looking at, and I started hollering for Richard. And I said to him, "Look, look, 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 look." And the moment that I did, I had this incredible feeling of being caught in the act, for lack of a better description. I really felt almost instantaneously that the minute I said something, this thing knew I saw it. I don't know how else to explain it was literally a feeling of almost fear. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck. By the time Richard looked up from his phone, the light adjusting from his eyes, I guess he just didn't have time. This thing was so quick. But right away I knew when I saw this light, this set of lights, was that there was either it was really small and really close, or really big and all the way up, because this thing stayed in perfect focus the entire time it crossed from horizon to horizon. It never blurred by any means. And I was blown away. I mean, this thing obviously broke the sound barrier, and there was not even a sound. My stepfather was in the Air Force here in Canada, and one of my first decks of cards that I ever got to play with was a recognition deck. And I was in Air Cadets, worked a bunch of air shows. I mean, I've seen planes, been around them, know what they can do. This thing went so fast, it should have made at least a sonic boom. It was crazy. So anyway, I'm losing my mind, and Richard is trying to calm me down. I want to call the military, I want to call the cops, I want to call anybody who might know what I just saw. And he's calming me down, and he tells me that, okay, look, for the next few days we'll come out and we'll bring a camera and we'll get it all on tape and everything will be great. And I'm thinking, okay, this sounds good. And then within 5 minutes, from the exact same direction that this ship had just come, from the west to the east, an entire wall of cloud came in, like completely wiped out the entire sky above me, and stayed that way for about 6-7 days in St. Thomas. I know that because I was trying to get out and look every single day to get clear view of the clouds above us, and there was nothing. I couldn't. But on the third day, I was out on the back porch cursing the sky because I couldn't see anything. And that's when I realized I did see something. I could see this beacon, for lack of a better description. It was something almost like almost like it was on your eye. Like if you were looking through it, like it was, yeah, transparent, but kind of riding the bottom of the clouds. And the center of this oval had like a black and red or purpley red lava lamp kind of swirling, looked almost like an eyeball. But again, like I say, it was just something that was so almost impossible to see if you weren't staring right at it. And I watched this thing cross over the back of my house and go from the north to the south, heading towards St. Thomas, or Port Stanley from St. Thomas. And so I went in the house, I wrote this down, I drew a picture of what I had just seen. Obviously, I was ready to see something. I figured if I took a picture of it, you'd never even see it anyway. And by the time I had thought to take a picture of it, it was too late anyhow. So I'm pretty lost for the next couple of days. I really don't remember a whole lot about the next 2 days. On about the 7th or the 10th, I don't know, because the next part is all a blur to me. I'm standing on my back porch in my backyard, and all of a sudden this whole episode just, I remember it like it was like I should have remembered it all along, like it was there just instantly. I realized that this whole there was a whole event during this last 3 days that I hadn't realized. I had been in the basement about 3 o'clock in the morning. I know this because I wasn't sleeping well around the time and watching TV. And I heard this voice in my head. And it said, in my own thinking voice, I should go out for a smoke. I'd never thought like that before. I just, anyone who's the smoker, you just pick up your stuff and go when you want to smoke. You don't think. And it was clear, like it was clearer and louder than my normal thinking voice. And I noticed it right away, which I found odd, but I still got up and went. And I got up out onto the deck on the back of my porch, and I'm standing there having a smoke when this craft comes in from the left-hand side above the trees. And it's barely touching the trees, coming in at about 2 kilometers an hour, probably about 30 feet up. And I get a really great side view of this thing, and it's got a huge cockpit on it for a craft that small. It's one of the things I noticed right away, but it was actually my very first thought was, wow, what a cool plane. Until I started realizing that this thing didn't do anything a normal plane does. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was about 10 foot by 10 foot. No bigger than your average sedan car, middle-sized car. But the cockpit, like I said, you could have fit a full-size human being in this thing. And as it came from the left and headed towards the side of the townhouse I was living in, it got almost close enough to hit it. And then it turned left and looked right at me. As it started coming towards me, I could see the bottom of this craft, and it had 3 lights underneath it, 3 paths, just like the craft I had seen 3 days, 4 days maybe before. And I got excited at this point. Now I remember thinking at the time that this thing doesn't make any noise, it doesn't make any, I mean, it's moving like it's being controlled, but it's not doing anything a normal plane or anything with an engine would do. I mean, anyone who knows anything about engines, even the best electric engines, are not completely silent. And to do what it was doing at the distance it was doing it from, I should have heard something. I mean, at the bare minimum, or at the maximum, there was a sort of a wind maybe sound. But again, that could have been the wind. I mean, it was slight, if anything. But I realized that these 3 pads on the bottom were dimmed down. They seemed dimmed down, in my opinion. And compared to the night before, or the few nights before when I'd seen it. And it was at that point that I realized that there was a 4th light. There was a red one in the middle. And it's at this moment that I noticed this 4th light, that it does kind of a typewriter, laser printer kind of thing in your eye. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And I'm standing there, and I'm looking in the same position, but now it's gone. I turn, and I look to my right, and here it is. It's half a football to a football field away from my house, going towards the Port Stanley, in the exact same direction that this beacon thing did earlier days before. And it's heading off really slow, going just as slow as it had when it come right towards the house. First thought is, I gotta chase this thing down, get a picture of it. I've gotta, I gotta do something. And right away, the voice breaks in again and says, "No, it'll be gone by the time I get there. I should just go in and go to bed." And so I did. I didn't even watch this thing leave my sight. I did as I was told. And the problem with that is, I mean, I didn't wake up Richard to tell him what I had just seen. I didn't I didn't call anybody. I didn't do anything. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even tell Richard that this thing happened until I remembered it 2 days later or so, I guess. Because like I said, I know that definitely it was the first night was the 5th. I know on the 2nd or 3rd night from that, I saw the beacon. But somewhere from the 7th to the 10th, when I finally told Richard, is when that happened. Because I walked around in what I considered a disconnected state. I felt like I was going through the motions, if you understand what I mean. Like I felt like I was here, but I really wasn't here. And yeah, it was a really disconnected state. I just didn't. And when it all finally hit me and came back, it was as clear as it had, like it had always been in my head. So that was those episodes. Now, to give you a bit of information about the voice, I should tell you about a prior incident that really had nothing to do with UFOs that I thought at the time, until afterwards, and this episode happened. 1994, February 11th, about 3:30 in the morning. I get a great idea. Me and my buddies should head out to McDonald's and grab something to eat and hit a back road, have a couple of beers, and head home. So we headed out to McDonald's. We got, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 miles from home. And I cracked a beer. And I handed one to the driver. And we turned left on a dirt road. Going booze cruising, what you do, 5 kilometers an hour. You're just putting along, doing, that's how it was back in those days. But anyway, we're putting along. We go to turn down this road, and the next thing I remember, I'm waking up, I'm laying like this in a car, and the car is on an angle like this, and I'm looking out through the windshield because I'm in the passenger seat, and I see snow coming over the hood of the car. I look up, and Gary is in my position against his door, which is odd because the whole car is leaning this way. Andy and Amy in the back seat are doing the exact same thing, left and right. Well, I reached up and I grabbed the wheel. I hollered at Gary to wake up, and I said, "Gary, wake the hell up." By this time, the people in the back had woke up, but maybe it had been better had they been asleep. We all woke up to see headlights on a tree. The next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of the radio playing, and Andy in the back seat telling me to turn it off. I did as he asked, because I mean, it was annoying as hell too. It was at this point that I realized that they were really, really hurt. I mean, I was hurt, but they were really hurt. Couldn't get out and do anything. And I found out later that the driver, Gary, had passed away, but in my mind, I have to look right past them to look at Andy and Amy in the back seat, but my brain won't let me remember that. Thankfully, it won't let me remember what Gary looked like. There was no car left where Gary was sitting, basically. They found our engine 150 feet in the woods. So I realize I'm the only one that can do anything, and I get up out of the car and I go for help. It's February 11th and it's cold as hell, and we're on a dirt road. Houses are few and far between. So I go to the first one, knock on the door. I can see the blood is just splattering all over the door as I'm hitting it. I don't know if it's mine. I don't know whose it is. It could be anybody's. But nobody's answering the door. And I went to about 3 or 4 of these over the course of about half to 3/4 of a mile, and nobody answering the door, until finally I got so cold. The next house that I had come to, they had a truck in the laneway, so I punched the window out of the truck. Pretty sure I was running on just sheer adrenaline anyway at this point. And I opened up the truck door and I went in and laid down. And I remember all of this absolutely clearly. I mean, there's no missing anything except for the stuff my brain doesn't want me to remember. And I'm laying there in the car. I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up to the sound of my own voice, very loud and very clear in my head. It said, "Jamie, get up. Your friends need you. They're dying." And without even a hesitation, I was up, I was on my feet, and I was at the next house. And the next house was owned by a guy I found out later. His name was Ray Fisher. And he was up watching a hockey game that had gone into 3 overtime periods, thankfully, that night. And all his lights on were in his house. So I went over and I saw his patio window, and I was banging on the patio window. But there was no answer. And I mean, I might have waited 5 minutes, but I might have waited 30 seconds. I don't know at that point. The adrenaline was probably just so overwhelming, which is surprising why I didn't break his window. If you think about what happens next here, because I left realizing that no one was answering, and I went to the next house that I could see on the there was another house on the property, so I went right over to this house. Well, I guess what had ended up happening was, when I left to go to that other house, Ray Fisher finally answered his door, but he had seen the blood all over the window and didn't know what to think, so he had to go back into his house and grab a baseball bat just in case. And then he come out, but he come out just in time to see me get to the other house. And I remember knocking on the door, but that's not how he remembered it. He remembered that I walked up, knocked on the door, and he said, "The third time you hit the door, Jamie," he said, "the whole door went in, door frame and all, and just laid down right in front of you." When I heard that, I was surprised, because I mean, I had just been pounding on his glass window earlier and I didn't break it, so I didn't know how I had done that. But I remember going into the house, And I remember looking around, hollering for someone, looking for a phone, and finally finding a phone and falling right there in front of it. And that's when Ray came up with the baseball bat. And then he realized that he wasn't looking at a burglar or someone. He was actually looking at someone who needed help. And the man kept me awake and saved my life and allowed me, by keeping me alive, to tell the police when they got there where my friends were. And we were able to save my friend Amy. But all of this because of the voice in my head that told me to wake up or we would have all died. For 15 years, I told everybody I knew that I had been touched by the hand of God, saved by an angel, by somebody, maybe God himself. Until the night I heard that voice again. And the night that voice called me out to that craft changed everything for me.